That thing takes up space, and most of those tools are probably too old to be useful. Maybe it is time to get rid of some of this.
If you cannot contribute more, maybe you should stop calling this your home. If you cannot contribute more, maybe you should calling this your home.
Claire Bennett said the words without raising her voice. That made them hurt even more. Arthur stood near the kitchen doorway with one hand resting on the back of a chair he had repaired only a week earlier. He looked at his daughter, then at Daniel, who was staring down at a folder of renovation estimates spread across the table. Arthur did not argue. He did not remind them of everything he had done. He did not ask Claire to take back the sentence. He walked upstairs, opened the small closet in his room, and pulled out a suitcase. Then he went to the garage and lifted an old wooden toolbox from the shelf. Daniel had complained about that toolbox many times. He said it took up space. He said the tools were outdated. He said Arthur should finally get rid of it. Arthur carried both the suitcase and the toolbox toward the front door. Behind him, Claire called his name. Before Arthur could answer, a small white van from the Maple Street Community Center stopped in front of the house. Ruth Carter stepped out, walked around the vehicle, and opened the passenger door.
"We have been waiting for you, Arthur,"
she said. Claire and Daniel stood in the doorway, watching the man they had just treated like a burden climb into a vehicle belonging to a place that seemed to need him. To understand why Arthur left, it is necessary to understand how deeply he had once believed that Claire's house would become his home. Arthur Bennett was 70 years old and had spent most of his life working with his hands. He had been a carpenter, a repairman, and the kind of neighbor people called when a cabinet door would not close or a porch step began to loosen. He never became wealthy, but he built a stable life with his wife, Margaret, in a modest house in Columbus, Ohio. The house was not large. It had a narrow kitchen, a small garden, and a dining table Arthur had made during the first year of their marriage. The table carried marks from birthdays, holidays, school projects, and family meals. Arthur could point to nearly every scratch and remember the day it appeared. When Margaret died, the house changed. The rooms were still full of familiar objects, but the warmth seemed to leave with her. Arthur continued to make coffee for 2 people for several weeks before remembering that there was only 1 cup to fill. He kept her gardening gloves near the back door and her favorite blue scarf on the coat rack. He told himself that he was managing well, but the silence became heavier with each passing month. Claire began visiting more often. She brought her children, Ethan and Lily, and they filled the house with noise that Arthur had not realized he missed. One Sunday afternoon, Claire sat across from him at the old dining table and made a suggestion. "Dad, you should not be here alone," she said. "You could come live with us. Ethan and Lily would love having you close, and you would not have to worry about maintaining this whole house by yourself." Arthur hesitated. He had lived in that house for more than 40 years. Every wall carried a memory of Margaret. Every shelf, every door, and every piece of furniture held part of the life they had built together. Claire reached across the table and took his hand. "You would not be a guest," she said. "You would be family. It would be your home too." Those words stayed with Arthur. A few months later, he sold the house. He placed most of the money into a savings account because he wanted to remain independent. He told Claire that he would contribute a fixed amount each month for food and household expenses. She told him that was more than enough. The first weeks in Claire's house felt hopeful. Ethan asked Arthur to help him build a model bridge for school. They spent 2 evenings measuring pieces of wood, sanding the edges, and fitting the small structure together. When Ethan carried the finished bridge into class, he told everyone that his grandfather had taught him how to build it. Lily liked to sit beside Arthur while he sorted screws and nails in the garage. She asked endless questions about the tools. "What does this one do? Why is this hammer smaller? Did you use this when Mom was little?" Arthur answered every question patiently. He told her stories about Claire as a child, about the time she tried to build a birdhouse and accidentally nailed one side upside down. Lily laughed so hard that she nearly fell off the stool. Daniel also seemed grateful at first. There was a kitchen cabinet that had been hanging unevenly for months. Arthur fixed it in less than an hour. A stair rail had become loose, and Arthur repaired it before anyone could get hurt. The back gate would not close properly, so Arthur adjusted the hinges. Each time, Daniel thanked him. "You are saving us a fortune," Daniel said one evening. Arthur smiled. He did not care about saving them money. He was happy to be useful. He was happy to feel that his presence made life easier for the people he loved. Arthur began helping in other ways too. He picked up Ethan and Lily after school when Claire and Daniel were busy. He watered the garden, prepared dinner on evenings when Claire worked late, and made sure the children completed their homework before turning on the television. At first, Claire would come home and say, "Thank you, Dad. I do not know what we would do without you." Over time, the thank you disappeared. The requests became more frequent and less polite. Instead of asking whether Arthur could pick up the children, Claire began sending messages that simply said, "Ethan finishes at 3. Lily finishes at 3:15. Daniel stopped asking Arthur to repair things. He left notes on the kitchen counter. "Garage shelf needs fixing. Bathroom door sticks. Please look at the garden bench." Arthur completed each task without complaint. He told himself that this was what family did. Family helped each other. Family did not count favors. But something was changing. Arthur noticed that his room was no longer treated as his private space. At first, Claire placed 2 boxes of holiday decorations in the corner. "They will only be here for a few days," she said. The boxes remained for weeks. Then Daniel added a printer he no longer used. A folded exercise machine appeared beside the closet. Soon, Arthur had to move around other people's belongings, just to reach his own clothes. When he mentioned it, Claire gave him a tired smile. "We are short on storage space, Dad. You understand." Arthur said that he did. The garage changed too. Arthur had arranged one small work area along the back wall. His tools were clean, organized, and carefully maintained. Many had belonged to his father. Others had been purchased during Arthur's first years as a carpenter. The old wooden toolbox was scratched and worn, but to Arthur, it carried the history of his working life. One Saturday morning, Daniel walked into the garage and frowned. "This place is getting crowded," he said. Arthur looked around. His tools occupied less than one shelf and a narrow corner of the workbench. "I can organize it again," Arthur said. Daniel pointed toward the wooden toolbox. "That thing takes up space, and most of those tools are probably too old to be useful. Maybe it is time to get rid of some of this." Arthur placed his hand on the toolbox lid. The tools inside had helped build Claire's childhood bed, repair the porch of the family home, and create the dining table where they had shared decades of meals. They were not useless. They were not clutter. They were part of him. But Daniel had already turned away. Arthur stood alone in the garage, looking at the toolbox that had once represented skill, work, and pride. For the first time, he wondered whether his family had stopped seeing the value in more than just his tools. That question stayed with Arthur for the rest of the day. He tried to dismiss it. He told himself that Daniel had only been speaking about the garage, not about him. People became impatient when they were busy. Houses became crowded. Families said things they did not mean. Still, the feeling remained. In the weeks that followed, Arthur became more careful about where he placed his belongings and how much space he occupied. He moved several tools into the wooden toolbox and pushed it farther beneath the workbench. He kept his shoes close to the wall. He folded his jacket over the back of a chair instead of hanging it near the front door. He also began spending more time outside the house. 3 mornings a week, he walked to the Maple Street Community Center, a brick building that had served the neighborhood for decades. It offered children's programs, reading groups, exercise classes, and a small cafe where anyone could sit with a cup of coffee without being expected to buy anything else. Arthur liked the quiet rhythm of the place. People greeted one another. Volunteers moved through the halls carrying boxes of books and art supplies. No one asked him to repair anything, although he often noticed things that needed attention. One morning, a chair near the cafe began to wobble beneath a woman who was reading the newspaper. Arthur asked a staff member for a screwdriver, tightened the loose joint, and returned the chair without making a fuss. Ruth Carter, the center manager, saw him. "You made that look easy," she said. Arthur smiled. "It usually is, once you know where to look." Ruth remembered that answer. At home, the tension continued to grow. Claire and Daniel had begun discussing a major renovation. Daniel wanted to convert part of the house into a modern office with built-in shelves, new lighting, and glass doors. Claire wanted to update the kitchen at the same time. They talked about the plans during dinner, comparing prices and showing one another photographs on Daniel's tablet. Arthur listened quietly. He was pleased that they were excited, but he also knew the project would cost far more than they expected. A few days later, Claire asked him to sit with them at the kitchen table. Daniel had placed a folder in front of him. "We have been working through the renovation budget," Claire said. "The estimates are higher than we thought." Arthur nodded. "That often happens." Daniel opened the folder and slid a printed page across the table. "We were thinking you might be able to help." Arthur looked at the numbers. The amount they wanted was not small. "How much help are you asking for?" he said. Claire glanced at Daniel before answering. $25,000. Arthur sat back slowly. The money in his savings account came from the sale of the house he had shared with Margaret. It was not a fortune. It was the security he had promised himself he would preserve. It meant he could pay for his own needs, choose where he lived, and avoid placing full responsibility for his future on anyone else. "I cannot do that," he said. Daniel's expression changed. "Cannot or do not want to?" Arthur kept his voice calm. "I have already agreed to contribute every month. I help with the children, the garden, repairs, and meals. The savings need to remain where they are." Claire folded her hands together. "Dad, you are living here. This renovation would benefit everyone." "It may benefit everyone," Arthur said, "but the money is still my safety net." Daniel leaned forward. "We are not asking you to give it to strangers. We are asking you to invest in the house where you live." Arthur looked at him. "The house is in your name." The room became quiet. Claire's face tightened. "That sounds ungrateful." Arthur was surprised by the word. "I am grateful. I have tried to show that every day." Daniel closed the folder with more force than necessary. "We have also made sacrifices. Food costs more. Utilities cost more. We have less privacy than we used to." Arthur heard the meaning beneath the words. It was not about the renovation anymore. It was about the fact that his presence had become something they believed required repayment. "I understand that I add to the household expenses," he said. "That is why I contribute, but I will not empty my savings for a renovation." Claire stood and walked toward the counter. She looked tired, frustrated, and more distant than Arthur had ever seen her. "You always say you want to be part of the family," she said, "but when we need help, suddenly everything is separate." Arthur watched her carefully. "My money can be separate without my love being separate." Daniel shook his head. "That is convenient." Arthur felt something inside him settle. It was not anger. It was clarity. For months, he had explained away every small moment. He had accepted the boxes in his room, the lists on the kitchen counter, the complaints about his toolbox, and the loss of every simple thank you. He had convinced himself that being useful was the same as being valued. Now, he understood the difference. Claire turned back toward him. "If you cannot contribute more, maybe you should stop calling this your home." The sentence landed quietly. Arthur looked at the daughter he had once carried through the house when she was too tired to walk. He remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle, helping her build a school project, and sitting beside her when she was frightened about her first job interview. He could have reminded her of all of it. He could have told her how much he had already contributed, not only in money, but in time, patience, labor, and love. Instead, he stood. "All right," he said. Claire blinked. "What does that mean?" Arthur did not answer. He walked upstairs and entered the room that had slowly become half bedroom and half storage space. He placed a suitcase on the bed and began packing his clothes. He took the framed photograph of Margaret from the nightstand and wrapped it carefully in a sweater. He gathered his documents from the drawer and placed them inside a folder. His hands were steady. When the suitcase was closed, Arthur carried it downstairs and went into the garage. The wooden toolbox was where he had left it, pushed beneath the workbench to make room for other people's things. He lifted it with both hands. It was heavier than he remembered, but the weight felt familiar. Behind him, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Arthur, what are you doing?" Arthur turned. "I'm taking my tools. You do not have to make this dramatic." Arthur looked at him for a moment. "I am not making it dramatic. I am making it clear." Claire came into the garage. "Dad, wait. We were upset. We can talk about this." Arthur carried the toolbox toward the front door. "You already told me what I needed to know." Claire followed him. "Where are you going?" Arthur had asked himself the same question earlier that week, before any of this happened. He had not expected to need an answer so soon. Then, through the front window, he saw a small white van pull up beside the curb. The words Maple Street Community Center were printed on the side. Ruth Carter stepped out and opened the passenger door. Arthur had spoken with her 2 days earlier about helping repair several tables at the center. She had asked whether he might be interested in doing more. At the time, he had said he would think about it. Now he understood that he had already made the decision. "We have been waiting for you, Arthur," Ruth said. Claire and Daniel stood in the doorway as Arthur placed his suitcase in the van and kept the toolbox on his lap. The drive to Maple Street took less than 15 minutes. Ruth did not ask him to explain what had happened. She simply told him that the center had an unused apartment above the rear offices and an old workshop that no one had touched in years. When they arrived, she led him down a quiet hallway and unlocked a heavy door. Dust floated in the afternoon light. Several work tables stood beneath covered windows. Shelves lined the walls. A row of old tools hung above a long bench, waiting for someone to use them again. Arthur set his toolbox down and slowly opened the lid. For the first time in months, he did not feel that his tools were taking up space. He felt that they had arrived somewhere they belonged. The next morning, Arthur woke before sunrise in the small apartment above the rear offices of the Maple Street Community Center. The room was simple. It had a narrow bed, a wooden dresser, a small table near the window, and a kitchen corner with just enough space for a kettle and 2 cups. It was not luxurious, but it was quiet. More importantly, nothing in the room made him feel as though he had to apologize for being there. His suitcase stood beside the dresser. Margaret's photograph rested on the table. The wooden toolbox sat near the door. Arthur made coffee, carried the cup downstairs, and unlocked the workshop. In daylight, the room looked more neglected than it had the evening before. Dust covered the work tables. Several chair legs were stacked in a corner. A cabinet door hung from one hinge. The shelves were filled with jars of mismatched screws, bent nails, dried paintbrushes, and tools that had not been used in years. Arthur stood in the middle of the room and smiled. He knew exactly where to begin. He opened the windows, swept the floor, and sorted the tools into small groups. He tightened the legs of the work tables, repaired the cabinet hinge, and removed pieces of wood that could no longer be used safely. Ruth brought him a sandwich at noon and found him standing on a short ladder, fastening a loose shelf to the wall. "You have already changed the place," she said. Arthur climbed down carefully. It only needed attention. Ruth looked around the room. People are like that too. Arthur understood what she meant, but he did not answer. He was not ready to speak about Claire or Daniel. He was not ready to explain how easy it had been for his own family to stop seeing him. For the next several days, Arthur worked quietly. He did not rush. He measured each shelf before drilling. He cleaned every tool before placing it in a drawer. He used scrap wood to make small containers for nails and screws. He repaired 6 chairs from the cafe and built a simple rack for the children's art supplies. People at the center began to notice. A volunteer named Maria stopped by the workshop and asked whether he could look at a broken drawer from the reception desk. Arthur repaired it in 20 minutes. A man from the reading group brought in a small stool that had belonged to his mother. One of the legs had split, and he was afraid to throw it away. Arthur showed him how to reinforce the wood without changing the appearance of the piece. A teenage boy named Noah often stood in the doorway after school, watching Arthur work. Noah rarely spoke. Ruth explained that he had been struggling in class and had stopped participating in most of the center's activities. He spent hours on his phone and usually left before anyone could ask him to join a group. One afternoon, Arthur placed a small block of wood on the workbench. "Do you know what this could become?" he asked. Noah shrugged. "It is just wood." Arthur handed him a pencil. "That depends on what you see." Noah looked at the block for a long moment, then drew a rough rectangle on one side. "A box, maybe?" Arthur nodded. "That is a good place to start." They worked together for nearly an hour. Arthur showed Noah how to measure twice before cutting once. He explained why patience mattered more than strength. When Noah made a mistake, Arthur did not take the wood away from him. He showed him how to correct it. By the end of the afternoon, the box was not perfect. One corner sat slightly higher than the others, and the lid needed more sanding. But Noah held it with both hands as if it were something valuable. "I made this," he said. "You did," Arthur replied. Noah looked at the box again. "I have never made anything before." Arthur smiled. "Now you have. Ruth saw the exchange and decided it was time to make a suggestion. "What would you think about teaching a small class?" she asked Arthur later that week. Arthur shook his head almost immediately. "I am not a teacher. You taught Noah. That was different." Ruth leaned against the workbench. "No, it was exactly the same. You gave him time. You showed him what to do. You let him discover that he was capable." Arthur looked toward the small wooden box Noah had left on a shelf to dry. Ruth continued, "We have people in this neighborhood who want to learn basic repair skills. Some are young. Some are retired. Some are living alone for the first time and do not know how to fix anything in their homes. You know things that could help them." Arthur thought about Daniel calling his tools outdated. He thought about the notes left on the kitchen counter and the way his work had become invisible. Then he looked around the workshop. "All right," he said. "We can try one class." The first class had only 4 people. Noah returned. Maria joined because she wanted to learn how to repair a loose cabinet door. A woman named Denise wanted to build a small shelf for her daughter's room. A recently retired bus driver named Harold admitted that he had always wanted to work with wood, but had never believed he was patient enough. Arthur began with the simplest lesson. He placed a tape measure on the table and explained that good work started before the first cut. "Most mistakes happen because people rush to begin," he said. "They want the finished result before they understand the material." The group listened. Arthur showed them how to measure, mark, sand, and join pieces of wood safely. He did not speak like someone trying to impress them. He spoke like a man passing forward knowledge that had been trusted to him. The class lasted 90 minutes. No one left early. The following week, 8 people attended, then 12. The center added a second work table. Ruth placed a notice in the neighborhood newsletter. A local hardware store donated safety glasses and small tools. People began bringing in broken chairs, loose drawers, damaged shelves, and wooden frames they did not want to throw away. Arthur created a monthly repair morning where residents could bring one household item and learn how to fix it themselves. He refused to do all the work for them. "I can guide your hands," he would say, "but the repair should belong to you." The workshop became one of the busiest rooms in the center. Arthur's days developed a new rhythm. He woke early, drank coffee, opened the workshop, and prepared materials. He taught classes, repaired furniture, and listened to people talk about their lives while they worked. He laughed more. He began sleeping better. For the first time since Margaret died, he no longer woke each morning wondering how he would fill the hours. He had a reason to get out of bed. He had people waiting for him. He had work that mattered. Meanwhile, Claire and Daniel were beginning to understand what the house felt like without him. At first, Daniel said the change would be good. "There is more space now," he told Claire. But the extra space did not make the house feel better. The garage door began sticking, and Daniel could not fix it. The garden bench became loose. Ethan struggled with a school project and asked when Grandpa was coming back. Lily stopped talking about her day at dinner because no one asked the questions Arthur used to ask. Claire began noticing all the small things her father had done without announcing them. The kitchen towels were no longer folded neatly. The plants near the back window began to dry out. The children arrived home to an empty house on afternoons, when both parents worked late. One evening, Claire opened the hall closet and found the small birdhouse she had made with Arthur when she was 9 years old. The roof was uneven, and one side still carried a faint pencil line where her father had taught her to measure. She sat on the floor and held it in her hands. For the first time, she remembered that Arthur's value had never been limited to the money he contributed or the repairs he completed. A few days later, a neighbor sent Claire a link to an article in the Maple Street Community Newsletter. The headline read, "Retired Carpenter Builds More Than Furniture at Local Center." Claire opened the article. There was a photograph of Arthur standing in the workshop. Noah held a wooden box beside him. Several adults stood around a work table, smiling. Arthur was smiling too. Claire stared at the photograph for a long time. Her father did not look like a burden. He looked needed. He looked respected. He looked happy. Claire closed the article, picked up her car keys, and told Daniel she was going to the community center. She did not know whether Arthur would forgive her, but she knew she had to face him. Claire found the workshop at the end of a long hallway, near the back of the Maple Street Community Center. The door was open. Inside, Arthur stood beside a large work table, guiding a group of people as they assembled a wooden bench for the community garden. Sunlight came through the tall windows and fell across the floor in warm rectangles. The room smelled of fresh wood, coffee, and the faint dust of sanding. Claire stopped just outside the doorway. For several seconds, Arthur did not see her. He was showing Noah how to hold two pieces of wood together, while Harold tightened a clamp. Maria stood on the other side of the table, checking the measurements. Everyone listened when Arthur spoke. No one interrupted him. No one looked impatient. "This joint will carry the weight," Arthur said. "So we do not rush it. A strong piece is built carefully, even when no one will see the work underneath." Claire felt the words settle heavily inside her. Arthur looked different from the man who had left her house with a suitcase and an old toolbox. His shoulders were straighter. His voice was calm and certain. He smiled easily. He looked like himself again. Ruth noticed Claire first. She walked toward her, but did not speak loudly. "Are you here to see Arthur?" Claire nodded. Ruth studied her face for a moment, then said, "He will finish the lesson in a few minutes." Claire waited near the wall. When the bench was stable, Arthur stepped back and let the group admire their work. Noah ran his hand along the smooth edge. Harold laughed and said he had not expected it to turn out so well. Arthur turned toward the shelves to put away a tool. That was when he saw Claire. His smile faded, but he did not look angry. He simply became quiet. "Hello, Dad," Claire said. Arthur placed the tool on the bench. "Hello, Claire." The others sensed the change in the room. Ruth asked the group to help move the bench into the garden, and within a few moments, Arthur and Claire were alone. Claire looked around the workshop. "I read the article about you." Arthur nodded. "It was kind of them to write it. You look happy." "I am." The answer was simple, but it hurt Claire more than if he had accused her of anything. She looked at the work tables, the repaired chairs, and the wooden box Noah had made. "I did not know you were doing all of this." "You did not ask." Claire lowered her eyes. "No, I did not." Arthur waited. Claire had rehearsed an apology in the car, but the words she had prepared suddenly felt too polished. They sounded like something a person said when they wanted forgiveness, without fully facing what they had done. "I was wrong," she said. "Not only about the money, about everything." Arthur remained silent. Claire continued. "I treated your time like it belonged to me. I treated your help like it was expected. I let your room become storage space. I let Daniel speak about your tools as though they were worthless. And then I said the house was not your home, unless you gave us more money." Her voice began to shake. "There is no excuse for that." Arthur looked at his daughter carefully. "Why did you come here today?" Claire took a breath. "Because I miss you. Ethan and Lily miss you. The house feels empty without you." Arthur's expression did not change. Claire quickly added, "But that is not the only reason. I came because I finally understood that we did not lose you because you left. We lost you before that. We lost you when we stopped being grateful. We lost you when we made you feel that your place in the family depended on what you could give us." Arthur looked toward the workbench. For a moment, Claire could see the pain he had kept hidden from her. "I loved helping you," he said. "I loved picking up the children. I loved repairing things. I loved feeling close to all of you. But after a while, I began to feel that the only part of me anyone wanted was the part that could be useful." Claire wiped her eyes. "I am sorry." Arthur nodded slowly. "I believe you are." Hope appeared on Claire's face. "Will you come home?" Arthur looked at her with kindness, but his answer came without hesitation. "No." Claire's face fell. Arthur continued before she could speak. "I love you. I love Ethan and Lily. I want to be part of your lives, but I will not return to a place where I have to earn the right to belong." Claire pressed her lips together and nodded. Arthur walked toward the window. "This apartment is small," he said. "The workshop is sometimes noisy. The coffee downstairs is not very good. But I wake up every morning knowing that my time is mine. I help because I choose to help. I teach because I want to teach. No one measures my value by the amount of money in my account." Claire stood beside him. "I understand." Arthur turned toward her. "Do you?" "I am trying to." That answer was honest enough for him. They stood quietly for a while. Then Claire said, "Would you come to dinner on Sunday?" "Not to fix anything. Not to help with the children. Just to have dinner." Arthur considered it. "Yes," he said. "I would like that." Claire smiled through her tears. "And after dinner, I will drive you back here." Arthur smiled too. That would be good. The relationship did not repair itself in one afternoon. Daniel came to the center 2 weeks later. He apologized without bringing renovation estimates, household expenses, or explanations. Arthur listened, but he did not pretend the hurt had disappeared. Trust returned slowly. Claire began asking, instead of assuming. When she needed help, she accepted that Arthur might say no. Daniel cleared a space in the garage and placed the old birdhouse Claire had made as a child on a shelf where everyone could see it. Ethan and Lily started visiting the workshop on Saturday mornings. Ethan learned how to build a small bookshelf. Lily painted a wooden sign for the community garden. She wrote the words, "Built with care." Arthur helped her straighten one letter, but he left the others exactly as she had painted them. Months later, the garden bench was placed beneath a maple tree behind the center. People sat there to read, talk, and rest. Most of them never knew Arthur had helped build it. They did not see the careful measurements, the reinforced joints, or the hours of sanding beneath the smooth surface. Arthur did not mind. He had learned that the most meaningful work was often the work people could not see. His class continued to grow. Some students came to learn how to repair furniture. Others came because they needed patience, conversation, or a place where someone believed they were capable. Arthur never became wealthy. He did not move into a larger home. He did not need a dramatic reward to prove that leaving had been the right decision. What he found was more valuable. He found a place where his experience mattered. He found the freedom to choose how he spent his days. He found a family relationship that could exist without costing him his independence. Most importantly, he found himself again. Arthur once believed the old wooden toolbox was all he had left when he walked out of Claire's house. Later, he understood that the most important things had never been inside the box. They were in his hands, his memory, his patience, and the heart of a man who still had so much to give.